Good afternoon, everyone. This is the WPD webinar on the Energy Data Hub, and shortly we'll be going through a bit of a presentation to discuss all the things that we're doing in terms of data and data visibility for the energy system, and specifically the license area that WPD represents. We're going through a few deep dives into some of the material on our distribution future energy scenarios and our electric vehicle strategy as well. So whilst everyone's just logging in, making sure that IT issues are all solved and everyone's audio is working, then we just give it a few minutes to let everyone filter in. And then we kick off with the main bulk of the presentation. So hopefully, if you can hear me, then everything's all working. I'll give you a few minutes just to settle in before we kick this off. Thank you. Okay, everybody. Well, I think that's about time now to make a start. So again, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Energy Data Hub webinar. This is an opportunity for us to present some of the work that we've been doing in terms of how we present data and share data that we collect on the energy system out to all of our various different stakeholders, and to do a bit of a deep dive on some of the more specific areas that we present data on, particularly our future energy scenarios, where we forecast out into the future how many electric vehicles, heat pumps, and generation, distributed generation is going to be connecting onto our network. And we're aiming to circulate that data as wide as possibly so that other people can take a similar view to us. And also we're going to be diving down into our electric vehicle strategy and how we're progressing electric vehicles onto the network and engaging with those various parties that are going to be using that sort of data. So within this webinar, we're more than happy to take questions throughout. There is a little application within the GoToWebinar app where you can write down a question, and so as and when they come through, we're more than happy to answer your questions. So we're going to keep it fairly informal and actively seek those questions. There'll also be a time right at the end to ask any wrap up questions on a sort of Q&A session. So if you want to hold those questions till then, you can do. If not, just fire them through and we'll answer them when they become available. Same goes if there's any IT issues or you're struggling to hear, then please get in touch with us and we can make some changes at our end. If there's anything after the webinar that you would like to know about or understand, then you can email into wpdnetworkstrategy@westernpower.co.uk, or you can go on our website. There is a live web chat facility which you can talk to one of our sort of frontline advisors. If they can't get the question to you directly, then they'll come through to a relevant business subject matter expert within the business and get you the answer you need. Any Q&A that we do go and get throughout today's webinar and the subsequent webinars that we're holding, we're going to wrap up into a big Q&A session and document and put that on our website, and that will be available probably about a week or so after today's recording that we're going to be doing. So on the the webinar today. I've got myself, Sharon, Oliver and Paul. We're all going to be going through various different sections of this presentation to try and give you the best view about how we're working with you to present the energy data and circulate that as widely as possible. So we really think that data sharing is very important, particularly with local authorities and local enterprise partnerships. And furthermore, with other third parties, we think that there's significant value in some of the data that we hold that can be used from external parties. So we're really keen to try and test out that approach and share as much of the data that we hold with other parties. And hopefully that will help us reduce costs either externally or within the energy system, and also realise that benefits of the clean energy transition and helping us reach some of those decarbonisation goals that we've got. Particularly recently, the Energy Data Task Force was been set up by Ofgem, and they were very much been looking at how energy can be used across the system, and how that data might have can be leveraged in other ways that we might not have traditionally done, and help reduce costs or increase value across the whole of the UK. The key values really is that we want to try and unlock the value within the energy system, try and drive some of the innovation in new products and services and business models, and then that will help us produce a more efficient and cost-effective system for the consumer. So we really believe in those sort of three key points and agree with the Energy Data Task Force. And what we're trying to do at the moment is open up some of the data repositories that we hold at the moment and make them better accessible to some of our key stakeholders. And this webinar today is sort of one of those first steps in that we have pulled together an energy data hub, and that is our kind of one-stop shop for holding all of our data that we've got within the system. And what we like to try and do is provide that sort of visibility to as many different people as possible. And this webinar should hopefully dive down into some of those topics that we've got within the Energy Data Hub and give a bit more detail and background about how we collect that information, what it's used for, and how we think other people should be using that as well. And it's not just an us to you type of conversation. We're also really keen on getting that two-way dialogue up. So if you think that there's some information that perhaps we need to process in a better format or in a different way than what we do at the moment, then this is the time now to start understanding how we can present that data differently, or how that might benefit your particular industry or area. And we're really excited to try and see whether we can leverage the data in different ways to be able to create wider benefits. But this is the first step to try and get that dialogue up and running. So without further ado, then I'd like to hand over to Sharon, who has pulled together the Energy Data Hub and has collated all that information, and she'll go through what we've done so far in terms of that particular portal and the information that's recorded within that.
Thanks, Ben. WPD already shares data with the industry, the regulator and the consumer. With the creation of the Energy Data Hub, WPD has encompassed all this shared data in one location. The aims of the Energy Data Hub are to unlock the value of data within the energy system, drive innovation in new products, services and businesses, and produce more efficient, cost-effective systems that work for consumers and realise the benefits of clean energy. You can access the Energy Data Hub and on the WPD website, and it's found under our network. The Energy Data Hub acts as a repository for all the data that we currently share with stakeholders, and data information can be found in 4 key areas: systems and network data, cost and charging, low carbon technologies, and strategic information. Firstly, systems and network data. This is where WPD shares information and data related to our network and assets and system operation. We've got the map hub. We've got many different types of mapping systems, and it made sense to bring them into one place, into the map hub. Mapping systems like the live power cuts map, network capacity map, network flexibility map, and so on. And here you'll find all our mapping systems. Signposting. Here you'll find information which deals directly with flexibility providers to the different distribution needs. Statement of works. This is where requests are made to National Grid regarding the impact of generation connections on their system. Data Portal 2 is an online service where stakeholders have access to WPD asset data and EMU Online. Alternative connections, where the network is physically reached its capacity, customers could be offered an alternative connection whilst reinforcement is installed. The Generation Capacity Register. This is a listing of generators connected to WPD's network, and Generation Outage Report is a summary of lost generation due to constraints in 2018 in megawatts. Secondly, costs and charging data. This is sharing of data relating to connection and the use of system charges, where you will find connection charging statements. These are terms and conditions relating to new connections and alterations, including generation. Use of system charges. Here there's information for electric suppliers, major users, regarding charges for use of our system, metering, etc. Facilitating share of information for potential generation connections consortium. This is a potential sharing of connection charges in an area as a consortium and sharing the cost of reinforcement or connection charges. Interactive cost tools. Here you'll find tools available to help you budget for the cost of obtaining electricity connections for your development. Thirdly, low carbon technologies. The amount of low carbon technology connected to our network is growing. This section on Energy Data Hub contains more information on how we are enabling this, showing data on our electric vehicle strategy, electric vehicle connection guide, and carbon tracer. And finally, strategic investment data. Here stakeholders can find out what we are doing to build a smarter system and how we are investing to meet the future needs of our customers, sharing data on the distribution future energy scenarios, distribution system operators, DSOs, which maps out the transition from DNO to DSO. Long-term development. This is data compiled to assist current and future users of WPD network to identify and assess opportunities available to them to make new and additional use of our distribution system. And flexible power, partnerships that generate income for local businesses and can enable us to accommodate increasing demand for electricity without having to build a larger network. Thank you.
Excellent. So thanks for that, Sharon. So we've got a number of different resources that we already share across our Energy Data Hub. These are the ones that we've been able to pull together in the most recent sort of timescale. And these are types of information that traditionally we have shared dotted about across the whole of our website. So pulling this together and consolidating it under a single resource, we hope should point people in the right direction. But what we're really keen on seeking feedback, either in today's session or further later bilateral discussions by email, is this information the right type of information that you're really looking for? Or perhaps can we describe it in a different way? Or are you not too sure about some of these terms? And do we need to not necessarily simplify, but better direct you to how these documents sort of fit together. So we're really seeking feedback on whether the information that we're publishing is being that it's all under one umbrella now, is that enough, or do we need to go to further work to be able to change the way that we do some of these reporting to better fit into how you might make use of this data. So to go and focus on a bit more of focus on in a bit more detail on one of these particular areas, we've got two guest speakers along today. Oliver is going to be talking about our distribution future energy scenarios, which is one of our key pieces of work regarding about how we decarbonise the network and transition to net zero. And then also Paul is going to be talking about our electric vehicle strategy and how we're enabling customers to move to those e-mobility solutions as and when the market moves towards that. So hopefully with the gift of modern technology, you'll be able to transfer over to Oliver to begin his presentation.
There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. As Ben said, I'm Ollie Spink. I'm mainly responsible for the production of our distribution future energy scenarios. Good afternoon from Bristol. So what are the distribution future energy scenarios? As a distribution system operator, it's a method to try and continue meeting the needs of our customers. This is a process that we started almost 4 years ago now. Each license area we have done in turn, so we are now on a 2-yearly rolling basis. So we started in first part of 2016 with the Southwest license area, and have gone round all of our license areas once. We're currently on the second round of distribution future energy scenario studies, and we undertake these studies with our project partner called Regen. In general, we use the National Grid future energy scenarios as a framework to develop our pathway for the growth of demand and generation in each of our license areas in turn, and really try and build up a bottom-up picture of how this will translate to how we can operate our distribution network. So as I said, we broadly follow the National Grid's future energy scenarios. So the ones that you have on the screen there are from the 2019 FES, and they're 4 scenarios of future energy pathways that we can have out to 2050 on 2 different axes, the x-axis being the speed of decarbonisation and the y-axis being the level of decentralisation. For our distribution future energy scenarios, we take a bit more of a near-term view, kind of 15 years or so out to the early 2030s. And where we really differ from the future energy scenarios is that we have a much more bottom-up focused approach. So if you can imagine the National Grid future energy scenarios as quite a top-down approach, looking at the national need for different technology growth across the country, it's quite agnostic in terms of where that technology growth will actually be located, whereas we find, particularly in each of our license areas, we have regional differences in the energy mix, be that generation and demand. We have a lot more solar PV in our Southwest license area than we do in the top of the East Midlands, as an example. So we find there's a lot of regional differences in our 4 license areas, be that in the energy mix, the network topology, or the local planning policy and appetite for different technologies. So when we do a bit more of a regional focus and a bottom-up approach for our future energy distribution future energy scenarios, we tend to take more into account those regional nuances that maybe the National Grid FES scenarios doesn't account for. So when we first started this process, we were very interested in the potential growth of generation in our Southwest license area. And as we went around our different more Midlands license areas, we found that our colleagues in our planning teams were a lot more interested in the growth of new build domestic and industrial commercial developments, as they tended to find that demand was more of an issue than potential generation growth. So as a result, we have now been for a year or so, 2 years, focusing on new build, domestic and non-domestic developments, as well as the growth of demand technologies from low carbon, potentially disruptive technologies such as electric vehicles and heat pumps, and also new generation and battery storage technologies that may be coming onto our network. The purpose of using multiple scenarios for this is to fully capture the uncertainty in technology uptakes. So there may be some technologies which have a lot of government subsidy and interest, which could have a high growth pathway, whereas others that might have a much lower pathway. So the idea of scenario-based planning is to really capture the envelope of credible futures that we may expect to see in the next 15 years or so. So in terms of data sources, us and our project partners, Regen, use quite a wide range of different data sources to feed into this process. A few of them are on the screen there. Local authorities and local plans are quite important in this process, as we find it's one of the best sources of at least planned and anticipated new developments from a domestic and industrial commercial point of view. And hopefully, if there are any local authority or local enterprise partnership attendees on this webinar, then you may have heard of us and Regen in the DFES process, engaging you earlier on in this process to try and obtain the most up-to-date information. Because it's a key challenge that we find is that obviously we have a DFES project that runs for about 6 months on a 2-yearly basis, and our timelines may not be particularly friendly with the publication of various local plan timelines. So occasionally we might end up not using data that is the most up to date or could be superseded quite soon. So that's a key challenge that we tend to try and engage local authorities and various stakeholders quite early on in this process to make sure that we have the most up-to-date data to use. So how we actually apply the growth rates for each of these different technology types is we split each license area in turn into what we call electricity supply areas. And this is effectively a geographic area drawn around all customers which are fed by the same common piece of upstream network infrastructure, be that a primary substation or a bulk supply point. So we spatially split our network into these smaller electricity supply areas, and then for each technology type, be that solar PV generation or electric vehicles, we spatially allocate where the growth of each technology is expected to connect to our network effectively. So we take what we call the baseline, which is our current position of connected generation and demand on our network, and then we use what's called a pipeline for the kind of near term, 3 to 4 years of connection offers that we have issued. So things we know about are going to connect to our network quite shortly, but haven't yet connected. So things that we have quite a high confidence that will connect in the near future. So we tend to have quite a short pipeline of high confidence data, and then in the kind of mid 2020s out to 2030 is where the scenario growth really takes on, and you can see in that illustrative graph on this slide a quite big range of potential growths under each of the 4 different scenarios. So the outputs of this study, we have a very large data set of every electricity supply area, technology, scenario and yearly growth rate, which comes in the form of a very large database, and also a report. As you can see a picture of the front cover of our most recent South Wales licence area report there for the DFES. As well as this big data set in the past for various local authorities and interested parties, we have provided this data on a kind of bilateral sharing basis where it has been applied for, and I think it's in the pipeline for us to start publishing our raw data from the DFES scenario projections on our Energy Data Hub in the not too distant future. So if you are interested in that, contact us, and it should be up there in the future fairly soon. Okay, and then finally, what is the distribution future energy scenarios actually used for? Because it's all well and good us having these scenario projections as to where we expect the network to be in the future, but it's mainly used to inform our investment planning and various business purposes. Initially, we mainly used our DFES for our shaping subtransmission studies, which is where we take the growth rates for each electricity supply area and apply them to a network model of an entire license area and do a really detailed network review. And you can see there the 4 license areas the report cover. And what they do is they really show under each scenario where we may expect to see problems on our network in the not too distant future. So if a community renewables scenario was to go ahead, we may see a potential pinch point on our network in 2027, whereas if the scenario was a bit lower growth, a bit less ambitious, more of a kind of steady progression scenario, we may not see that network issue out to maybe delayed by 5 or 6 years out to 2033, and it might not be too much of an issue for us to manage until a bit later on. So those studies really are quite technical. They really highlight where we expect to see potential problems if these scenario projections are to be believed in the future. And then on a more near-term focus, through I think as Sharon mentioned, our signposting and flexible power websites, these use our DFES scenario projections to, in a much more concentrated, smaller zone, look at where we may be able to alleviate some potential network constraints by using flexibility through customers instead of a conventional build solution. So all of this data that we publish is on our Energy Data Hub and is updated on a 6-monthly or so basis when we do each license area in turn. So if you're interested, go onto our Energy Data Hub, and if you're interested in as to when your license area may be next studied, please contact us and we'll be more than happy to help. So without further ado, I'm going to pass on to Paul Jewell, who's going to go through our EV strategy.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Paul Jewell. It's always good to talk about electric vehicles. They seem popular at the moment. And the first slide there really is setting the scene as to why electric vehicles are important to us and why we got to a position where we've recently issued an electric vehicle strategy. The top bullet point there talks about us planning for 37,000 electric vehicles and chargers in our region. And when we put in our current business plan, that seemed realistic. If you now look at the National Grid future energy scenarios for the most optimistic view that we were talking about earlier, by the end of the next price review, or by 2030, that rises to 3 million. And that's a lot of electric vehicles. If you try and compare it in simple terms to what we do at the moment, an electric vehicle uses almost as many kilowatt hours as a home. So that's 3 million extra homes connected to our network in essence. So that was the thing which prompted us to put together our electric vehicle strategy. When we were in the middle of writing it, what car set the Kia e-Niro as their car of the year? And that wasn't just the electric car of the year, that was the car of the year. And the quotes that you can see on that slide are what they said about it. And the UK's right-hand drive production of that car sold out in about 7 weeks from when it went on sale. So there's a drive, excuse the pun, there's a hunger for electric vehicles, and I think the people that are fortunate enough to be able to afford brand new cars are in the market for changing. The last bullet point on there is another change that we're expecting to see next year, which is that company car taxation rules change, so electric vehicles will become more attractive if you're a company car driver. That has a knock-on effect because all those cars will become second-hand cars in 3 or 4 years' time, so they start hitting the second-hand market. So you may have seen it, and if you haven't, there's a link to it on the slide. We put together our strategy to try and explain some of the things that we were doing and to try and explain the way that we were hoping to accommodate electric vehicles on our network. And one of the first things we thought we'd do is try and work out the capacity that already exists. The electricity network, certainly at a distribution level, is built to specific sizes of cables and transformers, which means there is a certain amount of headroom on our network. We looked at our local transformers, the transformers at the end of the street, and we looked at the difference between their nameplate rating and the demand that they currently see, turned that margin into kilowatt hours, and then divided it by 35 on the assumption that a standard car's charge is normally about 35 kilowatt hours. When we went through the maths on that for all of our substations, that essentially showed that we could support car charging for all our customers for a charge every fourth or fifth day, something of that order. There's a load of caveats in that, because service cables to individual houses might need uprating, cutouts might need uprating, but we were trying to show that the network that we've got, the low voltage network that we've got, has got enough capacity to cope. If you take that 35 kilowatt hours, it's 150 miles in most EVs, and if you then drop that into the Department for Transport's transport survey, a charge a week is sort of enough for most people to use their vehicles. So it gave us a bit of confidence to write the things that we wrote into our strategy document. The bottom bullet point is more important for us and the regulatory process and Ofgem than it is for customers, because we can only be positive about the acceptance of electric vehicles if our regulator allows us to carry on with the level of reinforcement that we currently do. And there's money in our existing business plans for uprating networks, and we expect there to be investment in the future going forward. So that's, if you like, a note to Ofgem to say that our confidence relies upon them allowing us to spend in a prudent way. Moving on to local authorities, when we were writing the plan in 2018, we also spotted that a lot of local authorities were getting central government grants and were looking to install car charging. There was a lot of initial activity that we saw with Ubitricity doing chargers connected to street lamps in some of the London boroughs and in Oxford. And whilst some of the street lighting networks in London are different and are quite substantial networks, I knew that a lot of the street lighting networks in the WPD region are designed and built for the street lights that are connected. They haven't got a huge amount of capacity. So we wanted to be able to discuss that with local authorities. We had a couple of events. Those events helped frame the information that we put in our electric vehicle strategy document. And it was interesting to spot that not all local authorities were going straight for street lamp charging. Some were looking at sort of hub charging solutions at car parks, which is interesting and also actually gives us less concerns than street light charging. And so that gave us options. There's another link there, which is to some guidance that we have given to local authorities based on what we know about our networks and what we heard them tell us. So if you are a local authority, that's quite a useful read. The other engagement that we've had is at a government level, because we want this to be right nationally. So with the change, the EU changes, the building performance regulations, we were lobbying that we wanted UK regulations to accommodate low carbon technologies. We were pleased to see the OLEV consultations in May. I think those have only closed in the last week, so if you were going to comment, you've just missed the boat. But they were about providing charging equipment in new homes and also ensuring that the chargers that are installed will be smart and could offer tariff signals, and suppliers could then hopefully help us move electric vehicles from peak times of use of the network. The other thing that we've done, the Superfast Electricity Project, that's a project that we're doing in South Wales, developed with Welsh Government support. It's a project with 0 homes, and what that is looking at doing is providing 3-phase electricity cables into premises. Normally we run 3-phase cables down the street and we put a single phase supply into each property. We're trialling the technical limitations, which we hope there aren't any, of putting those 3 phases into a customer's property. Now, whether they're used immediately or not, I'm not too concerned about. We were looking to basically beef up that final part of the network so that in the future we don't go back to customers and ask to dig up their front gardens and driveways. And that project is hoping to conclude at the end of this year. And if it's successful, we will look to change our design standards to those 3-phase service cables. Now, when it comes to accommodating electric vehicle demands, we've tried to make it simple. So we've tried to follow the sort of rules that we would if it was any other standard resistive load, and if it was, if you like, houses. Domestically, 3-phase service cables I've spoken about. Electric Nation was a project which we did, which ran around about 700 electric vehicle users. One of the things we learnt on that project was that customers with electric vehicles only charge their cars when they need to charge them. So you'll get a charge every 3rd or 4th or 5th day, which fits in nicely with us being able to size the network for that style of usage rather than everybody plugging in every night. When you move on to our low voltage mains, we expect them to be able to accommodate streetlight charging. Maybe not on the existing cables that run to the streetlights, because, as we say, an EV charges the same sort of a capacity as a house. So maybe if streetlights were being used, they would need new connections as if they were a house, those bigger connections. We also expect that will work for fuel stations with single chargers, which seems to be the rollout model of fuel forecourts, is just to add one at a location. Transformers become useful for us for the sort of car park hubs that I've spoken about, where we expect to see a lot of charging in one place. Our transformers are up to 1,000 kilowatts, so 1 megawatt of capacity. So if we were to establish a transformer in a car park, and it probably only takes 3 or 4 car parking spaces worth of space, that would give a megawatt of capacity that's available to be used for whatever range of chargers that are needed at that location. And again, it's a standard solution that we know how to deliver, so we will easily deliver that. And the bottom bullet point, when you get to things like bus depots, where they would need more than a megawatt, we're going to treat those just like as if they're big commercial or manufacturing factories, and we'll offer high voltage connections and let the installers take that high voltage connection and make use of it. There's a whole bunch of changes that we've made to policy in last year when we were writing the strategy and since the strategy, because we were reasonably cautious about electric vehicle chargers in the early days, cautious about the harmonic effect of those chargers and cautious about the earthing effect of street side installations. When it came to the harmonic effects, we did a project, the electric vehicle emissions testing project. I did smile that we managed to get emissions into an electric vehicle project. But what we did with that was we took all the electric vehicles that were available and a range of the chargers that were available at the time and charged and discharged vehicles and looked at the harmonic impact on our network and the power quality impact of those chargers. The good news for that was that the smaller size chargers, the 16, 32 amp, 3.5 kilowatt or 7 kilowatt chargers, had no power quality effect on our network. So we were able to tell our planners to connect those as if they were a standard resistive load, which makes connection quicker and simpler. The other thing that we've done for streetlight charging is there's a whole world of regulation to do with earth zones and what can be connected to what. We've changed some of the standard UK calculations to reduce segregation, and another important thing is the PME earthing system, which is quite prevalent on our low voltage networks. We now allow for applications up to 5 kilowatts of streetlight charging. Just to finish my section, there's a page of links to the different documents that we have written. So there's the strategy, the guides for both local authorities and a more standard guide. And at the bottom, if you have trouble sleeping, there's a link to the electric vehicle emission testing report, which if you are in the market of installing electric vehicle chargers, it will have test results for a lot of the chargers that were available on the market a couple of years ago. And that's my section finished. back to Ben now, I think.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Paul, and thanks, Ollie. So hopefully that was useful. That was two sort of deep dives in the types of information that we're putting out. As Ollie said, our distribution future energy scenarios is available to download already from the Energy Data Hub, and we're also going to be making sure that that raw information is available. I think we're committed to do that within our ICE plan for early next quarter. So there is some new and exciting amendments popping up on our distribution future energy scenario pages. And then also on the electric vehicle policy, you can see there that the strategy that we've got is really expediting what we're trying to do in terms of connecting electric vehicles on there and making sure that we, the electricity system isn't being a barrier to adoption and that decarbonisation. So that's pretty much it from the Energy Data Hub and the two deep dives that we've got today. There is a time now for any sort of questions. I see that we've had a few questions come through as we've been on the call, so we'll be able to sort of answer those. But if anyone's got any additional questions, now's the time to start asking those through, and we can kind of go through while we've all got you on the line here. So let me just have a little look to see what sort of questions. Okay, so we've got a question here on our network. Will our network be smart, and how will that help? Well, I think the answer to that question there is that our network is already smart. We've got a significant amount of monitoring and control on our network, and we're really using that smart grid to its advantage. But certainly, in terms of how will that help, we're really looking for the whole of the energy system to change alongside the changes in uses that will happen. So when electric vehicles are coming online, we're expecting them to be mandated to be smart as well. So that will help us in managing the demands and the loadings on our network, and all that combined with the technology that we've got already connected onto our network, the control and the monitoring will mean that we'll be able to keep the lights on as we've always done, whilst still enabling all these additional nodes to be connected at the lowest cost. So it's definitely something that we're working towards there. We've got a question here on harmonic effects. Good question in terms of electric vehicles. I might be cheeky and just pass that to Paul to see if he can answer on the harmonic effects.
No, that's fine. Yeah, not a problem answering that. I'll try not and get too technical, but sometimes when you say harmonic effects, it's already too technical. When you use equipment such as car chargers, they have a lot of power electronics built into them. So there's a lot of electronics that's used. Why have we got feedback on?
Ben needs to mute.
Ben, can you mute?
Yep.
Yeah, so there's lots of power electronics in those chargers, and the impact of the power electronics is it often puts distortions onto the nice smooth sine wave that the alternating current electricity has. Those distortions on that sine wave cause us a problem. There's all sorts of heating effects on our network as a result of that, and a reduction in capacity. So what we want to do is make sure that any of that distortion to our nice smooth electricity is minimized, and we can accommodate it on our network.
Excellent. I think that was me demonstrating about feedback on the call there, so timely. We have a question here on engagement, particularly with Milton Keynes Council. So we can categorically say that we have been in touch with all the local authorities across the whole of WPD's patch, and we have reviewed the development plans that have been put forward and published out in the public domain already to feed into our distribution future energy scenarios. But that isn't necessarily the only engagement that we're looking to have or willing to have. So quite frequently, local authorities and planning departments do contact us here in Network Strategy to pass forward some of their development plans, have a look to see whether there is sufficient capacity in the area before they greenlight things for development. So if that's the type of engagement that you want, then please do get in touch with us. Our email address direct is on our Network Strategy pages, and we'll be making these slides published on the Energy Data Hub after this webinar, which will share all the links as well. So if you want to sort of deepen that engagement, then please do go and get in touch with us. So another sort of question regarding some of the future ambition of some of the councils. We recognise that there are particular local authorities that have significant ambitious plans, not just to increase the size of the populations in their area by evolution, but really looking at revolutionary new garden cities or urban expansions and things like those. So we have definitely taken to those account within our distribution future energy scenarios. Depending on what the scale of that growth is and the development time cycles, then predominantly our DFES is really focused on a pre-2030 type of picture. But we're also in the position to start expanding our investment time horizon out from 2030 to 2050, so we can cover that kind of net zero ambition as well. So in the future rounds of our distribution future energy scenario, we'll be trying to project that out a lot longer. So yes, we take into account not just the kind of incremental expansion, but also some of the larger new developments that are looking to be done in our area. We really want to make sure that energy infrastructure isn't a barrier to any of the growth that's happening in our area. Coupled on to that, we've got a question there on net zero. That is certainly a hot topic at the moment. Net zero really massively affects the investment horizon for our network. So we've just been given some recent guidance for our next business plan, which is 2023 through to 2028 from the regulator Ofgem, and they have focused on sort of two key things. One, that our business plan should reflect what we think is going to happen to net zero and ensure that we've got delivery plans in place to be able to achieve that net zero. And then secondly, where we recognise that there is large decarbonisation levels set in legislation already, where we're changing the network infrastructure to be fit for 2050, it should be a single touch. So any reinforcements we'll be making going forward, and particularly on our next price control review period, will mean that whatever we're putting in will be fit to be able to serve up to 2050 and include that net zero decarbonisation. So we've got a couple of requests in there from about discussing further plans. As I say, the email address will be included in this slide deck. But if you want to talk to anyone individually, then you can go onto the WPD website on the chat advisor, mention one of our names, and we'll be directed straight through to that particular person. Or if you want to organise some sort of future meetings, there's plenty of opportunities within our website there to contact the Network Strategy Department, and we can go and get in touch to start looking at future ways of engagement, either within network strategy, the data that we hold, or sort of future distribution, future energy scenarios. Just having a look through to see the questions here. So we've got a question here on is there any role the local authorities can play in terms of guiding what technologies will be connected in the area? We feel that local authorities, local enterprise partnerships, and other people involved with creating the local energy strategies, sort of funded by BEIS, we think that these have a really good purpose that would significantly benefit us as network operators in terms of driving a particular need and a technology flavor in a particular area. So whether our network is designed for lots of domestic EV charging or decarbonisation of heating through heat pumps, or whether there's going to be lots of green gas in an area or roadside superchargers, that really radically changes the network, both in terms of size and scale, but also how much investment we need to make on the individual voltage levels. That is not in our gift as a network operator to be able to direct that. We're really looking for third parties to direct that, and I think local authorities and enterprise partnerships are in a real perfect place to be able to steer the needs of their communities and inform us of what their communities need and are looking to develop, and that will really help us ensure that there is a network that can support and deliver some of those ambitions. So we'd really like to see this, some of the direction that perhaps isn't set at a government level, start coming from the grassroots level, out from the local authorities and local government. A few questions on whether we're sharing the slides. Yes, definitely sharing the slides. They'll be available on the website in a kind of PDF format, but we'll also make available this webinar as well. So our performances here will be recorded for posterity and uploaded onto YouTube. So if any of your colleagues have missed out today but would be interested in hearing from what we've got to say, then they can go and get that. They can go and have access to that information and play that in their own time. So we're just trying to go and wrap up this time for sort of a couple more questions here. We've got a question around about, how do I understand the level of network capacity, and particularly if I've got projects that we're looking to develop in an area, can WPD give me a steer or guidance on that? So certainly we have a network capacity map that's available through the Energy Data Hub. You can go on there, you can type in a postcode, it's a Google Maps overlay, you can search for a particular area, and that will identify the closest primary or BSP or grid supply points, so the different voltage levels that we've got on the network, and you'll be able to see how much capacity we've got there, both for demand, so how much can be supplied through to industrial and domestic premises, but also for the generation. So if you're looking for any energy projects in those areas, you can see how much generation capacity might be available in those areas. So hopefully that should give you a steer about whether it will be a simple discussion to go and get a connection, or whether some upstream reinforcement might need to be taking place within those areas. And then once you go and get through to a kind of understanding that, then you can formally apply for a connection, and that's the time that we'll start engaging in the actual detail about whether a standard connection is best, or whether you might be able to make use of an alternative connection, or whether there's some other opportunities for using some of the perhaps flexibility that you're connecting on the network to help us out. So last question here then, before we wrap up, is there enough capacity for more than one car per household? Again, I think I'll throw that through to Paul to give a final answer on that.
Yeah, Ben, I'll take that one. There's another one that you might have missed, which I'll cover off as well. So the first question of, is there enough capacity for more than one car per household? We expect so, and we also expect that by the time people have multiple electric vehicles per household, we'll have done some of that reinforcement that we talk of. If you think of an overnight charge being 35 kilowatt hours of charge, if you were to do that every night, then that would mean that your cars would need to be doing more than 150 miles each every day and not charging anywhere else, which I think in the early times is reasonably unlikely. Those assumptions that we've made have been on a single phase service, and as I said, if we change that design standard so that all new properties get a 3-phase service, as long as we've got the backbone network behind it, that gives 3 times the capacity. And I think I'm rather hoping that we will be able to sort of keep ahead, if you like, of that demand at the moment. There was another question a bit earlier, which was, will we have a central management program for EVs, including vehicle to grid at scale? Quite simply, no. It's not the network operator's role to manage domestic low carbon technologies or generation. We're here to provide a network to support it. So at a domestic level, we're expecting tariff signals and suppliers to offer that move away from peak times. A couple of things that we are doing is that suppliers could get involved, or aggregators could get involved in our flexibility services. So if they could create more than 50 kilowatts of demand turn down or turn up, then they could offer that service in our flexibility pack. And the last thing we're doing is we are developing a short-term, if you like, management system called Connect and Manage, which would allow us to throttle back electric car chargers if they were causing us a problem and blowing fuses on our network, whilst we worked out what the reinforcement would be. It would essentially be a temporary solution to keep the lights on, rather than a permanent solution to manage that charging. There's another question that's come in, publishing the additional cost of 3-phase residential connections compared to existing. When the trial finishes, we will publish that detail. But at the moment, the essential difference in the cost is the price of the cable, and it's a couple of pounds a meter more expensive than a single-phase cable. So if you said it was, what, 40 or 60 pounds per property into your developments, then that's the sort of the value of it. It's not huge. Now, I'm hoping that has answered all the questions now. So back to you to wrap up, Ben.
Excellent, thanks, Paul. So we're keen to try and keep the time. We'll take all the questions that have been asked on the webinar, and we'll provide comprehensive answers back to all of these. We'll wrap them up into a Q&A document, and they'll be published on the website within the week. And we circulate those links back as a thank you to everyone else who's been attended. So that's it from us this afternoon. Thank you very much for attending the Energy Data Hub webinar. As a final wrap up, we have got a couple more in the pipeline. So we've got one on mapping on the 25th of November. We've also got one on flexible power and flexibility on the 10th of January. And then finally, we've got a further one on the 24th of February on the interactive cost tools and strategic investment. So if those sort of pique your interest, then please do register for some of these updates, and the links are on the website already, I believe, so you can sign up to those webinars if they're of interest. Please do circulate those across your colleagues. I'd like to thank my colleagues for presenting today. Thank everyone in attendance, and hopefully we'll see you on one of the future webinars. Thank you very much.